Welcome to the Startup Grind.
The way we typically like to kick things off is to really just learn a little bit more about you. So what was life like growing up in Charleston? What did your parents do for work, and what were your first few jobs?
Sure. So I grew up in Somerville, which used to seem like it was further away than it is now. I talk about that a lot. Like if you lived in Somerville and you drove to Goose Creek, you actually left one place, and drove through the woods for a little while, and then landed in another place. But it's kind of all one place now. But grew up in Somerville and graduated in '89, and went to college in Charleston then. So I graduated in college Charleston in '93. My first job was at Oak Brook Car Wash in Somerville.
Okay.
But I think probably had two jobs, I think, in college that maybe set me on a course. One was being a carriage tour guide.
Yes, love it.
Because I don't know if you guys know how the carriage tours work here, but like you go through a lottery system, right? So people come here and they plunk down $20, and they actually don't get to pick where they go.
Really?
Yeah, you wait in a long line, and then they pull a ping pong ball out of the little machine and tell you where you're going. So basically, while you're waiting in that line, you have to talk about how beautiful Charleston is while also prepping people for possibly getting a tour that takes them nowhere near the Battery, nowhere near the market, right? Like you go up through the College of Charleston, and people, when they get that tour, are not happy.
Yeah, so,
typically.
So how old were you when you were doing the tours?
That would have been my junior year of college.
Junior college. So at that point in time, did you have any entrepreneurial bug to go out and
No,
start doing
but
that?
I learned how I wanted to make tips, so I learned how you had to pre-sell.
Okay.
How great this possibly zone 3 tour could be, and then make, if people were grumpy at the beginning, they needed to be laughing by the end, basically. So that's salesmanship.
Okay. So what was your plan going into college? What did you want to do after you left?
I actually I was an English major, and I don't know that I had much of a plan, honestly. I picked the path of least resistance. I knew that's what I was best at and could probably put the least effort into to get out, and so that's what I did.
Okay, so where did you wind up then after college, Charleston?
So I finished in '93, and I went out west to find myself, basically, and it mostly worked.
Please elaborate. What does find yourself entail?
So I've spent a semester in Wyoming. I got big into the outdoors and was following Widespread Panic and doing all sorts of things you should be doing in college. And went to school in Wyoming for about a year when I was in school, and then when I graduated, I moved back to Durango, Colorado, and washed dishes and snowboarded and climbed rocks.
I'm pretty jealous myself. That's kind of my lifelong dream that I haven't marked off the bucket list yet.
So it was about a year, and I came back here that next summer and was doing carriage tours again. And a friend of mine, a guy I had gone to college with, we started talking about doing a map of Charleston, basically trying to do a map that was historical in feel, but was actually practical and you could find your way around with. So we started doing desktop publishing, and that would have been like '95 or '96. So you were using Power PCs and Quark Express, and I was the guy walking around selling ads to Eli Hyman and Tommy Condon.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's pause there for a second. So you're 20, how old?
25 or 6.
25 or 6. Back in Charleston after spending 3 or 4 years.
Not that long. I was out there about a year and a half.
Okay, year and a half finding yourself.
Yeah.
Come back here, you start doing carriage tours again.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first 2 years of that company, I was working full-time, yeah. So, I mean, I was basically selling ads and trying to produce stuff on my days off, yeah.
Yeah, so walk us through the really early stages of going through this entrepreneurial journey.
Well, I mean, I think at the time, I mean, it's in hindsight, there was a ton of naivety and just ignorance involved, thank goodness, because I didn't know any better. I had no money. I had my life and time in front of me, I guess. And I had nothing to lose, and so I just kind of threw myself into it. And about 2.5 years into that is really when Netscape 1.0 was launched.
Okay.
So it was like if you were 26 and you were doing desktop publishing and you were working 75 hours a week, and you were working with a bunch of tourism companies, and all of a sudden you were surfing the web, it was like, oh my God, this is going to change everything, So, I mean, I remember the moment that really hit me, and it kind of just kept burning.
Yeah, so did you, at that point in time, did you want to pivot the company, or you knew you just had to?
Well, we did. We started doing, we were doing the map, and then we started doing a gallery guide to Charleston, which actually worked, and we expanded it to Savannah and Hilton Head. And then we went back to those same people and started saying, hey, we can build you a reservation system. Hey, we can do your online marketing. And so we started picking up web clients. And I did that for about 4 years. And I mean, I think creatively it was a real success. We did some really early, pretty innovative things and designed some really amazing projects. But I just, none of us really knew how to run a business. So it was one of these things where I remember the day where I had there was 7 or 8 employees. We had this office over in South Windermere, computers, scanners, all this stuff, slide scanners, but yeah, my electricity had just gotten cut off, right? So it was like, you realize, I don't know what the answer is, but this ain't it.
Yeah.
So I just walked away from that, basically, and then got lucky and met Bob, who just came in, and some other folks here in Charleston who really did become mentors. They didn't know how business worked, and
Yeah. So what
saw
was
something in me. So.
the biggest thing you learned then, going through that first entrepreneurial journey? You had some success. You lasted up 4 years, which is probably longer than a lot of startups.
I would call it a creative success, though. I mean, sacrificing yourself for the sake of a carriage company's website, is not. I don't know. It felt successful at a creative level, but I wouldn't call it ultimately I walked away with nothing. So I think I learned that just an idea and energy and hard work isn't really enough. You have to have a maturity, I think, about how the world works that just a lot of people don't have when they're 25 or 6.
Yeah. So then how did you end up meeting Bob?
So we actually did a site. I knew I had met Monty Coley, who used to own, if anybody's been here that long, had Digits, which was on the corner of King and Wentworth way back in the day. And he was I had basically met him trying to do a website for him, and he knew Bob and introduced me to Bob, and we launched a business that actually failed called lowcountrygives.com, which was an early version of what sort of iGive has become now, where we had gone out, and that would have been 98 or 99, so affiliate programs were just sort of taken off. So we built a shopping portal that, the way we pitched it was, if you don't know how to navigate the world of e-commerce online, here's a place to do that. And we linked to 3,000 different e-commerce sites. And you could actually choose a local charity, and we would donate half the affiliate commissions to that charity. So basically, you were going, you're shopping, you were spending the same amount of money, but you were generating money for a nonprofit that was local. And I knew the first time I went to Amazon and ordered something and forgot to go to that site that we were in trouble.
Ebates today base their whole model off something similar?
Like that. Yeah, I guess I've kind of lost track, but I know that iGive and some of those sites have taken some time. And it's interesting because when the first instinct when I forgot to use lowcountrygives.com, despite having a t-shirt, was we started down the path of actually writing. I mean, it would have not been spyware, and we put it on the computer without the user's permission. But the idea was to create a database that would live on the user's computer, and anytime they went to a site that we had an affiliate relationship with, it would automatically reroute them to the affiliate page, and so they wouldn't have to they'd only have to say once, yes, I want to donate money when I shop online. And I don't know, we were probably 60–70% of the way down the road when the idea for Great Unpublished kind of started to form, and we just chunked it and just went with the Great
Total pivot with the new idea?
It wasn't even a pivot, it was just a whole new kind of second thing. We met a local guy here, Jeff Schwanner, some of you guys might remember. He was an editor of Up with Harold before it became the city paper, and he had worked in bookstores and knew a lot about the publishing industry, and I actually met him over at the Dharma Center, Tibetan Center here, and he told me he had this business plan for an online sort of publishing company, and I got him and Bob together, and he gave Bob the business plan, and Bob said that, as he always says, it read more like a communist manifesto than a business plan. So he and Jeff kind of worked on the business and actually turned it into a business plan. And so the original idea was to just be a publishing company that we would take Word documents from people, we would format them, we'd create a cover, and then we had heard of this thing called print on demand, which we said, we'll just give the books to those guys and they can print them on demand. And when we got out into the market, this would have been late 99, early 2000, I think Bob and Jeff went to the On-Demand Expo I mean, they had the Javits Center in New York City was full of people doing on-demand, and there was not one person there who actually printed one book at a time.
Okay.
They'd print 25, they'd print 50, and compared to 50,000, that was on-demand. But we really wanted the books. I mean, in our minds, like, it was clear that Amazon was going to be the way people bought books.
Right.
And so it was, if you're selling books on the internet, why would any of these books need to exist as physical things before someone ordered them? Why would you ever pay to print something before you collected money from somebody? And there are cases where it makes sense. John Grisham, yes, you can get the price down to 75 cents a book or whatever, but most, 99.8% of books, you could just print after the people ordered them online. So we sort of got put in a position where we had to build the manufacturing system in order to continue executing the business. So we did. We built and we took a completely different tack. I mean, at the time, Xerox had these big $1 million machines that they were selling to big printing houses that were supposed to print books on demand, and we didn't have any money. We were big strapping it, so we ended up basically buying like office copiers. And we would run them at like 400% capacity, and they were burned out. We'd shove them out in the alley and put another one in there. You know? But it made the footprint of the business very, very low cost to start.
Yeah.
And so we got it to work, and then we started printing books for other publishers, and then we started retailing, and then we started expanding internationally because there was a huge demand for this internationally. But you know, I think when I first started, maybe for $100,000, you could get an entire footprint working in a country relative to spending $1 million on machines and this and that and the other. So it was very easy to start small footprints in countries and then just let them grow organically. So.
Okay. And then what was the moment then, as you're expanding to new countries, you're opening it to new markets, where you knew this was it? You had that product market fit, you were growing every chance you got, and you knew this was going to be something a lot bigger than you might have thought originally.
That's interesting. I'm not really sure. I mean, I think, I don't know, I think it might have just been happening so fast that I don't ever remember one particular moment. I mean, certainly we, you know, and I mean, this kind of segues into talking about how the Amazon connection happened. Because I guess as that stuff started to unfold, it was kind of like, yeah, this is going to happen for sure, you know. And we had, in 2001, we did what was an amazingly groundbreaking project that, you know, has kind of gotten forgotten. But right after the 9/11 attacks, we partnered up with a journalist, and this was before blogs and all that sort of stuff, you know. But there were message boards out there, and this guy basically had a message board where American journalists that were stationed, were basically working in other parts of the world, would like connect on this message board kind of thing. And so we called him. I don't remember where we met him actually, but I called him and said, hey, we want to try to put out a book on the 9/11 attack that is like fresh. Actually at the time we called it book journalism.
Yeah.
At the time, like, so he put out a call on his message board, and a bunch of submissions came in. People talking about what it looked like on TV to them in some other part of the world. They lived in New York. Their apartment was on so-and-so street. And then we got connected with NYU Department of Journalism, and a bunch of the students went out and collected stories. And so 21 days after the attacks, we released this book, and it ended up selling about 15,000 copies and won an independent book award. It was the only thing we really actually published ourselves.
Yeah.
Everybody else, we were just taking things and formatting it. And it was awesome. They got this review in The Guardian where they compared it to McLuhan and Fahrenheit 451. I mean, intellectually, it was just this huge like thing right at the time. And but in the process, Amazon approached us and said, hey, we just started this ebook thing, and can you put this on Amazon as an ebook? And we did. And the guy that we worked with on that, you know, I would ping him every 14, 16 months, like, hey, here's what we're up to, here's what we're doing. He kept like kind of climbing up in Amazon, you know. And finally, one of those emails, he responded and copied a guy and said, we're having a bunch of internal conversations about print on demand, you should talk to this guy. And so we went out there in August of 2004 and, you know, had a 1-hour meeting that turned into a 3-hour meeting, and pitched them on letting us, because at the time, the deal we did in the Netherlands, we actually partnered with the national book distributor in the Netherlands, and we put a print-on-demand facility inside their warehouse, so that they could take books that were on the shelves, marry them with print-on-demand books, put them in the same box, and ship them out. So we pitched Amazon on the same thing. We're like, we can run a print-on-demand facility inside your warehouses, And we also pitch them on a white label publishing service that, you know, you can say to all your customers, hey, do you have a book? Do you want to publish a book? We can help you, and we'll brand that all Amazon, and we'll just do all the customer service and all that sort of stuff. And it was a fantastic meeting, but, you know, came back and there's really no traction. You know, we just couldn't get it moving afterwards. And then we ran into those guys in October at the book fair in Frankfurt, and just literally ran into them in a hallway. And you guys, yeah, we need to come see you guys. We want to come see you guys, which was then the moment of like, oh gosh, you know, they're going to come and see what we do. But, you know, you're not going to get anything without taking that risk, you know. So they came, and at the time, we had just brought on Andrew Roskill, who's actually the CEO of the current company, and he had a Wall Street background and a financial background. So he had just written the Reg D for us to go out and actually raise money to try to grow, and he pitched Amazon on investing on the Reg D, and Amazon kind of did a, we don't really take minority stakes in companies approach. So, and they were very clear that they were going to get into this business without us. So the prospects of competing with Amazon and Prime Demand were not rosy. And they offered us a lot of money for this.
Yeah, you took it. Why not? What was your exit strategy going into the business? Did you see get acquired by a big company?
It's the same thing kind of with this one, you know. It's like, I mean, the best exit strategy is making money, you know. I mean, if you can figure out how to crack the nut and make the money, and while you're shifting a paradigm, sure, shifting a paradigm scares people and rattles people and all that stuff, but if you're just doing, I mean, it's just too risky to try to do that optically and hope it's going to work out, you know. But if you're making money and you're paying your bills and you keep growing and the revenue's growing, then that's not to say that that's not going to be an option at some point. But I think our exit strategy is to build profitable businesses that grow fast. You know?
More power to it. Worked out pretty well. How did Andrew come into the picture?
So Andrew had been a software analyst. He was really, interestingly, the first computer software industry analyst on Wall Street for Solomon Smith Barney back in the 80s. And went to Credit Suisse first Boston and worked for a bunch of big banks as an analyst. It's funny, you can go on Google and find all these old videos of him on like CNBC and stuff. It's pretty funny. And his wife had a really well-paying job, and she was kind of commuting between here and New York, and they just liked the lifestyle here. So they moved here, and he was kind of quasi-retired when he met us, and we were working in this dingy strip mall in North Charleston behind a Church's Fried Chicken, and I think he just kind of came there and was like, I need to get there, get my hands dirty a little bit.
Get off Wall Street.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it was, you know, I definitely don't, I've never really run in those kind of circles, you know, so like when he first came in, I was interested to see what he was going to do, but man, he just rolled his sleeves up and got to work, you know. And,
how many employees did you guys have at that point?
Probably had about 60.
Okay.
Probably about, you know, probably 30 in production, or 20 in production, and 40 in the business, stuff like that.
Yeah. And do you think he was a key resource in securing the acquisition with Amazon?
Well, what he did, I think, was he was able, so they came in December, so August, then we see them in October, they come in December. We had a term sheet within, I don't know, 3 weeks of them visiting, right? So, and that was right about the first of the year, and the deal closed on April 1st, so it was amazingly fast.
Yeah, wow.
Really. And I think what was good was Andrew was able to sort of manage that whole due diligence process and really pay attention to that while we paid attention to the business. Because I think what can happen in a lot of startups is a big company comes in, they want to buy you, and now like your mind is just consumed with making sure you don't mess up this deal, and in the meantime your business is starting to slip because you don't have as much energy. So I think it worked out really good that you could focus on that while we just
sounds like it.
Getting up and doing what we're supposed to do.
And where were you fitting in at that point? What were you focusing on?
So I was the first guy out selling this to authors and publishers, and so what happened is that group ended up growing into, I mean, I think when we sold it, we had about 30 salespeople. We had 25 salespeople doing author sales, and 5 people doing publisher sales, licensing content from publishers. And you know, so it's not dissimilar to what I'm doing now, you know, evangelizing, selling, and trying to paint a picture of a new world, you know, and managing all the, you know, that process, that sales process.
Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. You guys are acquired by Amazon. You accept a job as part of their team. What is life like in the big corporation after having started a few startups yourself?
Well, I mean, I think I probably had a little different perspective because I had never taken any business classes. I just sort of won it. And I knew that this would be an incredible education for me, so which is why I signed up to go to Seattle, because I figured if I'm going to learn, let me go there and really learn. So there was definitely an excitement about it, but things were a lot different. Yeah, I mean, it was I had to shift my mindset into really thinking, just learn and just make sure this acquisition works for them, you know.
Yeah.
I was very, that's why, I mean, what I realized is the reason I had to go to Seattle was because Amazon buys companies all the time, and I can tell you, people there are working so hard they barely notice, you know. So I knew that the guy in the building who was buying $3 billion of books from publishers a year, that's the guy I needed to sell.
Right.
Not one publisher at a time, because he could send one email to every publisher that said, if you're selling less than 100 books a year, send us your PDF files, or we're not going to sell your books anymore. That's it.
Yeah,
Sales made, right?
That works.
So I spent a lot of time in the hallways there, and I coming back to Charleston a lot, and I was just committed to making sure the acquisition worked, and it did.
Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah, they've got 600 people or something working up in North Charleston now, you know, so they've kept it here. They bought another company at the same time that did DVDs and CDs on demand, and you know, that just kind of got bypassed by streaming, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Streaming just sort of leapfrogged that. I mean, they still do CDs and DVDs on demand, but it hasn't grown like books, because people still do order books, you know. And so they merged all that together, changed the name to Create Space, but it's based here. I mean, they do all those sales.
Was that part of your negotiation that you wanted to stay here, or they just did it?
I think we had a culture that it just made sense, you know. I mean, we were a selling culture. And I remember one of the executives there just describing us in a meeting to a bunch of other executives one time, saying, "These guys are like, you ever seen that car on Cops where they shoot all the tires out and the car's still going down the interstate with sparks flying on? That's these guys." Which was awesome.
Scrappy guys keeping the business going.
So it was. So I think it just worked out that way. We definitely didn't negotiate that.
And then going into Amazon, did you have a mark for how long you wanted to stay?
Well, when we had to stay for 2 years, that was part of the deal. I stayed 2 years and 4 days.
2 years and 4 days. Not a coincidence. And then going in there, did you know that you still wanted to be an entrepreneur? Were you thinking of retiring? What was your thought process at the end of that?
I know I'll never retire, and I think I think I knew I would be an entrepreneur again. Yeah, I mean, I think probably if things had gone different, I did not have plans to leave Amazon in any way, shape, or form when it first started, you know. But I just realized over time that it's just not. I mean, it is a culture where being entrepreneurial helps you for sure, but it just wasn't going to fulfill all my needs for sure. So I mean, I think over time I realized I'm gonna leave.
Yeah. When you did choose to leave and start a new business, is there anything that you took away from Amazon that you said, like, I definitely want to continue to do this, or I don't want to turn into this?
I took a ton away from Amazon, yeah.
Any stories or anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, how they hire, you know, I mean, they have a very high hiring bar. And, you know, when I was there, it was 10,000 people, and now it's 100, so, I mean, God knows how it's changed, right?
Yeah.
But a lot. How they assess people, I mean, we're not really at the size yet. We're kind of, even though we're 30 people now, it's really run more like there's not a lot of hierarchy, and there's very open communication, but it gets challenging as you grow. When you get to 10,000 people, it's hard to do. So a lot of the ways they think about how they assess people in their jobs and things like that, I think as we grow, we will definitely be applying some of that thinking to it. And I think they know how to, they realize that they're in the business of making people happy to spend money. And a lot of companies don't get that. And, you know, even in the industry we're now in the library industry, we spend a lot of time talking about that. Like, they just know that if, you know, I was at a library conference and somebody said, "Oh, libraries don't know how to market." You know, and I mean, maybe that's true, maybe that's not true, whatever. But at Amazon, free shipping was marketing.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, we could buy ads or we could give people free shipping. So they gave people free shipping, and then somebody told another person, and they tell another person, and so they realized that customer loyalty is an ongoing process, and you have to invest in it. And marketing dollars, what you would have spent on marketing, if you spend that on customer experience, then it actually pays off.
Yeah, it's a really good takeaway. All right, Daniel, kick it over to you.
Mitchell. Can you guys hear okay? Everybody can hear okay? Jimmy, if you guys want to get anything to drink, please do. But so I want to get into a little bit about the business aspect as well. So I know, and so we'll dive into this a little bit. Did you when you left Amazon? Did you? How long was it before you guys started BiblioLabs? It was a couple of years.
Well, Bob was at Amazon for 3 months, and then he. So when I would come back from Seattle, because I was coming here a lot, the facility was still here. I would see him when I was here. He actually started this as a pilot in late 2006, early 2007. So I was still at Amazon at that point, and. You know, at Amazon, I had done some deals with big content aggregators and some libraries and stuff because they had these digitized books. But at that point, the world of library digitized books was completely different. You know, I mean, 10,000 books was all the books in the world back then. You know? But we got those up for sale. So, but what happens at Amazon? Well, what happened at Amazon was, you know, you would get that first tranche of books up, and then, you know, everybody would move on to the next thing. You know, so there was really not a lot of attention given to managing that kind of historic reproduction business as something you really think about. How can we be good at this? And so that's really what Bob was testing out. He's like, all right, if I put up 10,000 books and I know what my cost is, will they sell at a level that is sufficient to make this a business and not a hobby, basically? And they did. And so those books were being hand formatted and, you know, had a way higher cost to produce. And they were still producing enough money. So really when Jason, you know, so I guess when I left Amazon in April 2007, I was pretty burned out. And my wife and I had a documentary film company, and she was working on a film down in New Orleans after the hurricane, and we had an opportunity to make a film with an orphanage down in Costa Rica. So it was, you know, it was stuff that is philanthropy because you're spending all your own money to do it, but you at least are creating things that have your own voice. And so it was a lot of fun, and so I think it took about 9 months, Bob, Andrew, and I getting together, and then when you realize like Jason was buying into it, you know, I was kind of like, all right, we can make this happen. So I would say by early 2008, we were all sort of firing on all cylinders. So it was about 9 months, I guess.
Good. What is the kind of the elevator pitch, you know, of the company, of the new company, BiblioLabs?
So we have a product called BiblioBoard that is our flagship product, and we are reinventing the way people interact with libraries digitally, on computers and on tablets, because libraries because they are reliant on vendors for the technologies that they use to deliver things to patrons. Those vendors have never felt like they've really had to keep up with the rest of the world. So the products have always been pretty bad and clunky and ugly and fractured and all these other things. But I think the iPad makes that all so blatantly, you know. It's like we're used to struggling on computers, right? We've been doing it for 20 years, clocks spinning, things freezing, like, you know. So I think psychologically we have a lot more tolerance for pain. And what the iPad and what the tablets have done is reduce our tolerance to pain to zero, right? Like, you just expect elegance, you expect everything to work the way you want. You tap things that better do what the iPad is supposed to do. Those behaviors, those idioms are incredibly important. And for ever since the tablets have come out, most of the library vendors have just said, you can go to our website on iPad. You know, which is just ridiculous.
So is that how you guys came up with the first product, the BiblioBoard? I mean, is it?
So we came up with BiblioBoard out of being in that print business. So we ended up building a print-on-demand business that took historically scanned books from libraries and a growing number of books that were available in public domain sort of repositories, and we built a black box that could just take in random scanned books and actually turn them into books, because a picture of a book page is not a book. You know, you pay $30 on Amazon and get a photocopy of a book page, you're going to not feel like you got your money's worth. So we had to write software that created margins, that created covers, that managed the metadata at scale. So we've published, since 2007, we've published 6 million books.
Nice.
So we've just driven the cost of publishing the books down to fractions of a penny.
Right.
We get them out on Amazon, and then we let the kind of collaborative filtering of the internet figure out what people want. We never know. So every day we probably sell 50 to 100 books that haven't been ordered in the last 150 years.
Wow. That's neat.
In print.
That's great.
And we don't know what they are. If you ask me what our best sellers are, I can tell you that, because it's just an aggregation business of a total long tail business, you know. But we got it to work, and we got it profitable. 2009, we sat digital out the first couple of years because everybody was using e-ink devices, and we just didn't think that the e-ink was gonna create the experience we wanted around historical books and historical pages and maps and all those sorts of things. So when the iPad came out is really when we decided, all right, you know, and it's interesting because, I mean, that print-on-demand business, I mean, it's generating a lot of money, and it basically takes a half a guy, right? So at that point, we'd kind of put all the books up, so we were sort of like, we could kind of basically effectively shut this thing down, because they just send you money every month, you know, once it's up for sale. Or we could take this money we're making and try to build a bridge to digital. So, and we had the chemistry and the people and everything happening, so we just bit it off. So we've essentially acted as our own VCs, using that cash flow to, I mean, now it's about $7-8 million we've got invested in this platform, but it's come out of cash flow. We didn't have to go raise money. We don't have to every 3 months go explain to somebody what we're doing when we know it's going to be totally different 3 months later. I mean, that's really distracting, because the world's moving all the time, and when you have to go explain that to people, it's a lot of work. So, so we launched an iPad app in 2011. So one of our big partners is the British Library. We put about 75,000, 80,000 books in print for them that they had digitized, and it was a nice business for them. So we went to them and said, hey, can we build an app with these 75,000, 80,000 books, a consumer app? And they said, yeah. So we launched it in June 2011. Apple caught wind of it. I remember I've read over the questions, and one was like, how did you get so many downloads? But that was the reason, really. We launched it at the Worldwide Developers Conference, and it just blew up. And so it was interesting, because these were materials that the libraries think of as research materials, right? Like, somebody's going to come in, they're doing a dissertation on something, or they're doing research on something, and they ask for this book and that book, and they've got a head full of keywords and knowledge to sort of tease content out of these kind of kludgy interfaces where you just kind of search. And what we found was, when we built the interface, we actually, in a very crude way, put the books in about 21 different categories, like history of Central and South America, history of the American Revolution, you know, very broad sort of categories. But we saw that overwhelmingly, when when you got 500,000 regular people off the street downloading something, you can see how those behaviors work. And they weren't searching. Like, they didn't know what to search for when they were faced with 80,000 books. So they were using those browse nodes. They were like going in and finding books on the American Revolution. And so it was a really great way to start digital, but it wasn't really I mean, you know, it's a subscription service, $3.99 a month. We've got a few thousand subscribers, but it's certainly nothing that is going to, like, change the world. So what we figured out is we have to build, and then we also, of course, at that point had other libraries contacting us saying, hey, can you build us an app? And we really did not want to be a contract app development shop. So we said, we need to build tools. You know, it's that self-publishing mentality, that democratization of publishing tools kind of thing. We said, we need to build web-based tools that let these libraries, archives, professors, historians, whoever, will set the interface on top of archives of content. So we wire the platform into all sorts of public domain repositories that are already online. So you can show up to our tool and have a subject matter expertise but no content and still build a product, because we've found all these places that you can pull content from. But for the British Library or the National Library of Spain or Finland or whoever, they have their own repository of stuff. And it's typically this very kind of kludgy, back-end kind of preservation system, basically. So we can set these publishing tools on top of their repositories and let their curators go in and go, okay, I'm going to tell the story of the history of bicycling in the 19th century. Do some searches, tease out the 150 books on bicycling from the 80,000, organize them in the cycling in Great Britain, cycling in North America, cycling in Europe, fix the metadata or enter the metadata, make sure the metadata is clean and hit publish, and then the next time they would see it, it would be in a working iPad app. So they didn't have to go hire developers, they didn't have to go to the technical group and figure out if they could get budget dollars to build an app. They were just building apps with these tools we built. And so we rolled those out in January of 2013, I guess. Yeah, 2012. That January 2012, we hired some historians who built our first 400 products. It was about 60,000 curated objects, something like that, just so we could make the software better, just so we could have a universe of stuff to kind of launch with and show people how it worked. And then third parties started coming on later that year and building stuff.
So that's a lot of operations and scale to get to that point. For a lot of the entrepreneurs out here, startups, what's kind of some of the best advice that you can give to get where they are now and to start scaling to help grow their business?
Well, I think one thing exists now that didn't exist when we started this business, which is AWS. When we got into the print business, we had to build a data center. 400 servers, I don't even remember how much money, right? You don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
Like, I mean, we've moved everything to the cloud now. I mean, Amazon just lowered their prices 70% 2 days ago. I mean, that's incredible. How little it costs to have this monumental technical infrastructure. So, an engineer that understands AWS would be a good thing to have on the list if you're doing software.
Right.
Because it's amazing. You just pay for it when you use it. It's incredible.
So what do you think the future of digital publishing is?
Well, I think we've just done a deal, and I'll just talk about Publix for a minute, because we work across K-12, public, academic, and corporate libraries. I mean, I think we've come into the library market the way we came into the publishing industry, which is we didn't know anything, and it was a great time to not know anything about publishing and be starting a publishing company. And I think about this very similarly, that we're a software company, and we work in the library industry, but our technologies are being deployed in all kinds of different ways in each of those markets. And so I'll just talk about Publix a little bit, where I think, because it's a real circle closing with the self-publishing business. So libraries struggle with user experience in a big way, right? And our platform sort of solves that for them. If they subscribe to BiblioLabs, they can deliver books, multimedia databases, they can deliver anything in a unified, consumer-grade interface, no checkouts, no returns, no turnaways, no weird publishing enforced rules that a person trying to read a book could care less about, none of that stuff. And then there's this huge world of self-published books, well over 1 million in the last 10 years for sure. There's some good stuff in there. Books break out of those self-publishing ecosystems with more and more regularity now and sell 20,000, 30,000 copies a month, 1 million copies. Right? So there's good stuff in there that will find resonance with readers, but the libraries have absolutely no way. They don't have the resources nor the knowledge to be able to tell a good or an interesting self-published book from one that they wouldn't want their patrons to see because it hadn't been edited and was full of, didn't make sense. Because there's those too, right, in self-publishing. So we've just done this really, I think, game-changing deal with the Library Journal. So the Library Journal is like the brand in the libraries. They review books. It's, a stalwart brand. And we've just done a deal with them that we're going to roll out officially in May, where their editors are going to actually curate self-published books into genre-specific modules that we can sell to public libraries. So there'll be a horror genre, there'll be a horror module, there'll be a young adult module, there'll be a comics, there'll be a children's books. And the authors will be able to submit their books to this program and have them recognized. They won't make royalties from that. you know, the way I always explain it is that by the time, and we're going to sell these at really aggressive prices, by the time the author would get, you know, if you set a $50 minimum before an author got a check, they might all die before they got a check, right? Because you're talking about pennies. And so once you can kind of rip that out and say, look, royalties isn't why you would do this. The reason you want to do this is because if you don't have people reading your book, you will never create an income stream from writing.
Right.
And that's what, when you look at a lot of this, Hugh Howey is one, if anybody's read his stuff, Wool, it's a big science fiction bestseller now. All of the self-published authors who become superstars have said, let people steal your book, pirate your book, does not matter.
Right.
Like, get people reading your book. If you don't do that, you will never have a writing career.
Right.
So we've positioned this to the authors to say, look, today and growing, we've got probably 6 to 8 million patrons on the other side of our ecosystem. And we're going to take your book, and then the library journal in the library is going to tell their patrons, here are some young adult books that you should be reading. And they're not going to have that one book, one user. They're not going to have all these weird constraints. It can go viral. They could have 100,000 people in your county reading the same book at the same time. And so this is going to get you readers, and you can convert those readers into paying customers with your next book.
Right.
Don't put your next book in the LJ program, right? Like, because now you've got a reader base. So it's kind of exciting to have the opportunity to give the libraries a super compelling, super cost-effective, you know, because that's a whole nother strand, is how the publishers have really abused the library. I mean, the libraries mark the books up 4 or 5 times to sell them in the libraries. I mean, they've just completely cut, the models just completely hobble the library and the experience they can deliver. So this will do the opposite. This will do the opposite of hobbling. The library will be able to deliver thousands of really good, independently published books, no constraints. And so, I don't know, it's a good sort of closing of the loop of bringing, because I'm a big believer that anybody should be able to publish a book.
Right.
That doesn't mean there doesn't need to be some sort of curation or quality sieve. It's just now not the publishing house. It's just further downstream now. The books are going to get published, and they're going to be available. Now you just need to build that editorial layer on the other side of the books so that readers can kind of know, here's the stuff I should be reading. So I'm happy about that.
So what do you believe 2 years out, and as you said earlier, focus on building the business, making money, growing the business. But 2 years out, where do you see BiblioLabs? Where do you see the company? Size, growth, products?
It's hard to say. I mean, we definitely don't get hung up on head count, you know. I mean, it's funny because we go to these library shows where these executives will get up and talk about how many engineers they have, and they don't realize they're accomplishing the opposite of what they're trying to accomplish a little bit. It's
Right,
kinda
yeah.
Really? You got that many engineers and the products are that bad? Because you can't throw more mediocre engineers at a problem and solve it, you know?
Right.
It just doesn't work. It gets worse.
Right.
And people just don't get that, you know? I mean, I think Nathan Merhol, the guy who started Microsoft, you know, said that a great motivated engineer isn't twice as good as a mediocre engineer.
Right.
They're 10,000 times better than a mediocre engineer, you know?
Right.
So we're very focused on hiring those kind of people, and you know, we really look at revenue per employee as a metric.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
love that.
So as these, as we're about out of time, but we can follow up any conversations, any questions anybody has afterwards. You talked about culture earlier. As people are building their startups, and how do you? I know as well, culture is critical. It's critical between sales and marketing and engineering and operations, and as well as the co-founders as well. How do you and you can't really create culture, but you can create culture. So how do you guys build that culture in your business as you continue to move forward and keep it where you need it to be, so that it doesn't become KPIs and reports and everything that you eventually have to do as your company gets to a certain level? Yeah. How do you keep it there?
Well, I mean, I think we've got, I guess, two sort of. I mean, I think you create the culture by the people you hire. I think the hire. I mean, I think first the company has to see that the leadership cares about what they're doing and is doing it for the right reasons and is engaged and working as hard as they are,
right.
which happens in our company. But I think it's also who you hire. I mean, I think you have to hire motivated people and then not do dumb things to demotivate them. You know? And a lot of people don't get that. So I think if you start there, I mean, I think Bob says a lot, you know, everybody who works here has to be smart, motivated, and give a shit. Right. Self-motivated, right? And 2 out of 3 of those isn't really going to cut it.
Right.
You know, so if everybody you're hiring is like that, then, and you know, and when we're hiring people, we tell people that we fire people really fast. I mean, we're not scared to admit our mistakes and say, you know, I thought I had the right guy here, but this isn't the guy, you know. And we tell people that, and we say this isn't a place where you can hide. You know, if you don't come in and you don't do those 3 things, it's going to be hard.
Right.
And it's going to be apparent really quick, you know. So if that's not the kind of culture you want to work in, it shouldn't work here.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're at the point now where we can open up for questions and answers, and then probably a fast hour, wasn't it? Yeah. So thank you for that. Any questions? I know there's got to be questions out there. Anything in terms of? Go ahead.
As far as hiring engineers, coders, have you, these ones that are 10,000 times better, have you found them in the Charleston market, or are you getting them from outside, or a mix of both?
We have found some here, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, a couple of the, I mean, you know, one guy the first mobile engineer we hired was a guy who used to work for us at BookSurge, and it was one of these just, I mean, you know, we sort of went to the BL said, yeah, you can do it. We hired him on the side. He was living in Raleigh. We hired him on a project on the side. He was working on 10, 15 hours a week. I went and showed the prototype to the British Library and came back and told, I was like, you know, and they loved it. And I said, I came back and told Bob, I was like, you realize we have to actually hire somebody now, right? To like, do mobile. So he was like, let's get Marcus. So I sent Marcus an email and I said, we want to hire you. And he sent me back an email that said, we have a company meeting in the morning. I'll call you tomorrow afternoon. And he got laid off the next morning and started work for us on Monday. So sometimes you got to get a little lucky too. But he was our first guy. But we've been really good. I mean, we pay a $10,000 referral fee if we hire an engineer. That's an open offer here in this room too. So if you know any good engineers and we hire them, $10,000. So there's that pitch. That helps. So we have. I honestly can't think of. I don't think we've had to relocate one engineer. So
Nice.
Good.
yeah, because you know those guys, once they get that good, they can make a lot of money anywhere. You know, so they really do want to work on stuff that matters.
Right.
You know, I mean, a couple of our best engineers, one of them was working at a collection agency. You know, he built the whole interface for the employees collecting money. I'm sure he did a fantastic job at it. But it was, you know, it wasn't reinventing how libraries work.
Yeah.
I had a question so how as a leader can you keep your team motivated?
I think hire the right people and then just stay out of their way and let them make mistakes. I mean, if you've hired the right people, they're never going to make the same mistake twice. And they're rarely going to make an egregious mistake because they have enough discernment and sensibility to distill information for you in a way that helps you contribute to their decision. So I think you got to just hire the right people and then get out of their way and let them work.
Any more questions?
Back there.
Not a question, but I was going to say I'd love to talk at some point because we're with the Iron Yard and we're running an intensive code school. I'd love to talk with you about what makes a quality engineer because that helps us build our curriculum really well.
Yeah, and connect you with Jason, our IT guy, because he's so that would be great. Yeah, let's change parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up the hour at least. If you could stay and network, talk, ask questions. Please, tacos and burritos tonight for everybody for dinner.
And this is Bob Holt here. He's our chairman.
Yeah, please.
He's my co-founder of BookSurge.
Yeah. Bob, you want to speak? You want to add anything to what Mitch has to say?
No, I was impressed. No, it was good. To answer the person who asked about motivation, I don't think we've ever been able to motivate. I don't think you can motivate people. I really don't. You can demotivate them. You can do that really, really quickly.
Well, how do you not demotivate them? I don't know.
Okay, so firing people who need to be fired. So you have someone who's not productive, you have someone who's, you can't find them when you need them, and so someone says, well, let's do time clocks, right? And so you just demotivated everybody who is working the way they want to work and producing the stuff for the person that you just need fired, because your gut tells you this person needs to go. And the way we maintain our culture is we fire everyone who doesn't believe in the culture.
Right.
And if you're not, you owe it to yourself. Spend a bucket load of time at work. You owe it to yourself to enjoy what you're doing. And certainly if you're in technology, you have the luxury, if you're good, you have the luxury of being able to work in something that jazzes you up. And if we're not it, then that's cool, and go find what that is, because you owe it to yourself. And we don't believe that we're so good at hiring. When you interview 20 or 30 people, you know the 20 that you shouldn't hire, right? And then you're left with 10. And, we don't delude ourselves into thinking that we're going to pick the right one, and maybe half of them are right, and maybe we pick, one of the ones that isn't. It becomes apparent pretty quickly, and when it becomes apparent, you need to just cut them.
Yeah, I'm confident every time we fire someone, morale improves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a great book that I've used in my previous ventures is from Daniel Pink, Drive, and he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You hire incredibly motivated people. You give them the freedom to operate within their special gifts and their talents. You give them mastery, which means you give them the freedom to improve their skill set without boundaries, and the freedom to execute. And then purpose. You help them see that they're a part of something much bigger than themselves. And I've used Daniel Pink's kind of methodology very successfully. So if you haven't read that book, it's amazing.
It's a great little clip. I think this still is just what you were talking about. It's his speech on that.
Oh yeah.
And I think the Royal Society of Art has illustrated it, and that one clip has stayed with me since I've seen it, and it really helped me step off and start my own thing. It was so clear that mastery, autonomy, purpose, and I think he says, what motivates people as far as pay. It's like, pay them enough. So if they're not looking elsewhere, and once you find those people who do have the smarts and are motivated and they're part of something that's a larger purpose. It was like when Steve Jobs, the classic, went to the Pepsi founder. Do you want to make sugar water the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? So
It's interesting. I just posted on LinkedIn a really interesting. It was a little blurb from Steve Jobs talking about and I think you have to be a leader who's not like this. I think he nails it here. He said that when he left and Scully took over, he fell into the illusion that idea was important, right? That if you had an idea and you had some good people around you, they could go make the idea happen. And he said the distance between a great idea and a great product is 10,000 trade-offs and decisions and things you didn't see in the idea, so new things, but you lose a lot too, and it's those trade-offs and that consistent pressure against the idea that eventually creates a great product. And if you don't, we're looking at buttons on every product. All of us, the entire, every partner is sitting in those meetings looking at those mock-ups of our products and saying, what if we did this and that? And I think you've got to be able to fly from 50,000 feet to 5 feet. That's the hardest part of being an entrepreneur, I think, because I can get a little queasy sometimes. Is you have to be able to go from big picture to down in the weeds, making a decision about a button in 30 seconds, from one phone call to another, So, but it's like riding a roller coaster. It's also more exciting.
Well, again, hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully it was somewhat fun for you, inspired at some level, and we're going to have these events once a month, at least once every 2 months. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. We appreciate any of the information, and thank you, Mitchell. So with that, thanks for coming.